before 8 is the time. We'll continue to reflect on the comments you heard almost 24 hours ago today, actually, 24 hours ago on this show yesterday, from James Cleverly concerning how certain fans should perhaps behave themselves over in Qatar. But let's pick up on a reaction to how Mr Sunak did in his first Prime Minister's Questions with Sir Keir Starmer. A lot of the headline writers, one has to say, in titles such as the Daily Mail, the Daily Express and others, are very supportive. Let's get the view of Nadhim Zahawi. Of course, he's a Conservative MP and Chairman of the Conservative Party. Thank you for coming on the show. What did we learn about Mr Sunak's abilities to be in the pressure cooker environment of PMQs, in your view, yesterday? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. I thought he was focused and delivered a very clear message that his focus will be sustainability and, of course, stability of the government, and spoke about what we need to do, which is going to be some pretty tough decisions for the autumn statement on the 17th of November. And I think what came across is a Prime Minister that has real clarity about how he will conduct government, but also a plan for dealing with the NHS backlog, and of course, plan for schools, a plan on policing and delivering that 20,000 more police officers, and a plan for energy to make sure that we have energy security in this country. Whereas Keir Starmer clearly had no plan, was just simply personalising the attack on Suella Braverman.
We'll talk a bit about your colleague, Ms Braverman, in just a moment. Just something you mentioned, why the necessity to put back the financial statement, the budget, whatever we're going to call it, 3 weeks, Chairman?
So the autumn statement on the 17th of November, because if actually, Nick, you'll understand this, but if you looked around the cabinet table yesterday for that first cabinet meeting, a number of new secretaries of state were around the table. They've got to get their feet under the desk and get to grips with their departments. And I think it's right that the Chancellor and the Prime Minister wanted to have that bit more time to make sure that we do the work really well. There are no easy decisions. The Prime Minister said that, but he will always protect the most vulnerable, as he did as Chancellor with the £1,200 for the 8 million most vulnerable households. And I think he wanted a bit more time to get this right, demonstrate to the markets that we will bring debt down as a proportion of GDP in the medium term, that we will be financially responsible, whilst delivering that energy plan, that the things I've spoke about with the NHS and, of course, schools and policing and all the things that we care about. There's a big headline today about illegal migration. I know the Home Secretary is totally focused on breaking that business model, working with their French counterparts, going to Albania to talk to the Albanians. There's an abuse of the system of a very good piece of legislation, which is the Modern Slavery Act, being used at the moment to sort of circumvent our immigration system.
We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Can I just, as Chairman of the party, when you heard the Leader of the Opposition say it was, quote, a grubby deal that the Prime Minister did to bring back Suella Braverman, how do you respond?
I think he needs to reflect on that sort of language. I think people are allowed a second chance. Suella Braverman, in her letter, said that she made a mistake and she wasn't going to brush it under the carpet or pretend otherwise and try and hang on to her job. She resigned. She fell on her sword. Of course, she didn't know there was going to be a change of government so quickly. And politics has become compressed in your time in behind that desk of yours at LBC, Nick, over many, many years. Things used to happen in sort of months or years. Now they happen in hours and weeks, as I discovered last weekend. But
we'll talk about that in a moment. Your support for the big dog. Don't worry. We'll get there, the great Zahawi. It's on the list.
Absolutely. But I believe in second chances. I believe in redemption. Okay. I think this Prime Minister looked at the detail.
In fairness, Chairman, we have a Home Secretary where there are security issues. Her nickname now, not that we should go by nicknames, is Leaky Sue. And there are suggestions that security services are nervous sharing sensitive information and data with her. I don't need to tell you, this is the woman who's dealing with national security, counter-terror, everything else. Is she fit for the job if she's Leaky Sue?
Well, she certainly is fit for the job. I've worked with Suella Braverman, and she's a very capable Home Secretary. She's got a real focus on everything from policing and, of course, our borders and all the good work that I know she will do in breaking the business model of these gangs that are exploiting.
But is it right?
People.
Security services have nervousness sharing material.
No, look, Nick, you've been around for long enough to know that these unattributed quotes in the newspapers this morning aren't worth the paper they're written on. And in my view, the Prime Minister did the right thing. He looked at this detail and he believes in second chances for people, and he believes that rightly, she's got the right capability to deliver on this job.
And it's a heck of a task in front of the Home Secretary. We'd all agree on that. One aspect of which, the cost of housing asylum seekers, Chairman, was almost £7 million a day. Now, yours is a government, I'm sure, is going to preach fiscal responsibility and accountability. How long will this go on?
Well, that's exactly why I think it was right to bring Suella Braverman back, because she and I, when I was Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster in the Cabinet Office, I would chair a weekly meeting to look at this. She highlighted it. She drove the agenda to make sure we try and deal with it as quickly as possible to get these people out of the hotels and into other more suitable accommodation. And, of course, to process
what is suitable accommodation, Chairman? What does that mean?
So we're looking at where we can, whether it's at Manston or elsewhere, build more capability so we don't have to use hotels at all as quickly as possible. And I know that Suella Braverman is totally focused on this with the new team and, of course, with the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Oliver Dowden now, and they will be dealing with this. It is a major issue. We're doing a couple of things, Nick, with our French counterparts. One is working with them to enhance that patrol, that work to stop these boats coming across. We're looking at engaging with the Albanian government to make sure that we try and close down this loophole as well that's being used with the Modern Slavery Act. And she's looking at other options, including operationalising the Rwanda scheme as quickly as possible.
One other area, I think I know what you're going to say, but I'll try. There is concern from some of my listeners at the report that Rishi Sunak could be backtracking on the 10% triple lock rise promised, just a matter of days ago. Where are we on that, Mr. Zahawi?
So I won't preempt, as I'm sure that's why you were saying, the autumn statement. Rishi did say there's going to be some tough decisions, but he also recognises that we have to look after the most vulnerable, and that's what he will always do. Pensions are uniquely, and I'm going to state the bleeding obvious here, they're unique in the sense that they can't take on work to increase their income, and therefore are uniquely vulnerable. And I know that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor will be very, very conscious of that fact. And on the 17th of November, you'll see a Chancellor stand up and take some tough decisions, no doubt. Putin, let's not forget, there's war on our continent. Putin's using energy as a weapon against us. You see it reflected in food costs and all other costs of living. And I think we have to make sure, whatever we do, we look after the most vulnerable, but also make sure we send a very clear message to the markets that we are financially responsible.
Talking about financial responsibility, the last couple of minutes we have together, Chairman, in the last half hour, you probably won't be aware, the Shell has posted third quarter profits of $9.5 billion. Those are profits. That's up from $4.1 billion in the same quarter last year. You're a very canny financial bloke, so I don't have to tell you that's more than double. The chief executive of that company has said in the past, we have to accept as a society this can be done smartly and not smartly. There is a discussion to be had about governments needing to tax people in this room to pay for it. Mr. Zahawi, record profits for Shell. The chief executive saying we need to look at tax. Can you tell me that we will review the position of windfall taxes?
So the Prime Minister, when Chancellor, actually was the Chancellor who introduced the windfall tax, which is raising £5 billion from the energy producers like Shell. It also is incentivising them. This is why Rishi Sunak was so smart about this when he was Chancellor, that if they make an investment in the UK, because we need to increase our gas production, we did this year, 26% up from the North Sea. If they make those investments, then of course they will be incentivised to do so. But these are tough decisions, and I know the Chancellor and the Prime Minister will be looking at everything as to
so
how
they
we
might
make
look
sure
at an additional windfall tax, as the Shell boss has suggested, Mr. Zahawi.
I would not preempt any decisions, but absolutely the Chancellor and the Prime Minister will look at every decision and will, on the 17th of November, stand up at the dispatch box. The Chancellor will stand up at the dispatch box and deliver an autumn statement that demonstrates that we have an energy plan that delivers energy security, because what you can't do is create a tax system that disincentivizes investment.
Okay. Two of your constituents in Stratford-on-Avon contact you. They're two gay men or they're two lesbian women, and they say, Mr. Zahawi, are we safe to go to the Football World Cup and hold hands? What would your advice be?
I would say you should not compromise on your identity or your sexuality or your sexual preference in any way. And of course, you are safe to go to the World Cup. Qatar's policies.
Bit of a change from Mr. Cleverly exactly a day ago on this very show in that very seat, Mr. Zahawi.
Well, no one should have to compromise at all, in my view. I was Equalities Minister as part of my work at the Cabinet Office up until last week. I'm very proud of what we've done in the UK. We use every opportunity when we engage with the Qatari government to share with them how we do things over here. They've had a different historic journey, of course, but football is a celebration of diversity, and I'm sure the Qataris completely understand that as well.
Well, you better have a word with the guys at the top of the FCO, hadn't you? Mr. Cleverly got it totally wrong. Your response to that?
Well, I didn't listen to James's interview with you yesterday, other than to say I know James Cleverly. I've worked with James Cleverly, and I know he would share with me.
But we don't need
what
to
I'm
flex
saying
and
to
compromise. Two lesbian women, two gay men, a trans person doesn't need to flex and compromise.
No one should need to compromise on their sexuality or their preference whatsoever.
And lastly, you did reference this earlier, with timing being everything, whether it's in the field of comedy or Strictly Come Dancing, how do you reflect now on your support for Boris Johnson? An article, I understand, on the Telegraph website that went out just 2 minutes after Mr. Johnson had withdrawn. How do you reflect on that now, Mr. Zahawi?
I called him in that article Boris 2.0, and I tell you what I believed very strongly over the weekend is that if the perception had been that a group of MPs had conspired to keep Boris Johnson off the ballot paper, the man who delivered that mandate for all of us, we all share that mandate, I think that would have been really negative with the country and with our members, of course. It was much better that it was his decision, that he got the numbers. He got 102 endorsements by MPs, but he reflected. Right. And actually, I called him Boris 2.0. Boris 1.0 may have still gone forward and actually had the vote and probably created a much more difficult situation for us because of division between MPs and members. But Boris 2.0 did the right thing. He put country and party ahead of self, and he supported Rishi Sunak, and I know he'll continue to support Rishi Sunak. And I'm very proud that we, as a Conservative family, Nick, came together because ultimately we are one team and supported Rishi Sunak. You look around the
How many times did Boris call you on the weekend?
All the talent.
How many times did Boris call you on the weekend, Mr. Zahawi?
I spoke to him a number of times. In fact, I saw him yesterday. He is a great asset to the party. He's a great asset, as the Prime Minister has said. He said it yesterday as well, to the country and what he delivered for Brexit, for the vaccine deployment. We were reflecting yesterday, he and I, on the vaccine deployment. It is a remarkable thing, and of course, not least, what he did with Putin and help into Ukraine, which I know that country will never forget.
I need to get to the headlines. You're a busy man. Thank you for your time. Nadhim Zahawi appearing for the first time as chairman of the Conservative Party here on LBC. 3 minutes after 8, let's get the news headlines.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.